to somewhere else. Thanks for joining us today. So this is a facilitation fund event for the current catchment area restoration group. But as always, we like to sort of spread ourselves out to the other facilitation funds that we run in Gloucestershire. So the aims of the current catchment area restoration group is to improve soil health, water quality, and to link habitats across Breedon Hill. So this event, we've got Nick Woodyatt joining us. Nick is not an independent advisor, as he's just an agronomist, should I say. He works for Edda Frost, and he's also a soil health consultant for Aiva. But I will let Nick introduce himself in a moment, because he'll have a lot more background to give you than I can. But just to give you a little bit of house husbandry, we've got the chat function down the bottom of the screen. So if you do want to ask questions, just go to that chat function, and then when Nick's finished talking, or when we have sort of natural breaks, we can ask some of the questions that you want to ask Nick. We are going to record this so we can share it with other members later on. If anybody objects to that, can you just let me know straight away, or put something in the chat function again, and then we'll know not to record this. Or maybe we won't record the questions at the end, I don't know. But if you've got a problem with that, just let us know. So we're hoping this is just going to take us about an hour. Please ask as many questions as you can. That's what Nick's here for. We just need to draw out as much information as possible from him. And what I'm hoping, following this event in January, we can have another event with Nick, drawing down more on the biology following this. So this is like a little taster of what's to come. And it would be great to get your feedback after this session and let us know more about what you want to learn more about for your farms, how you want to improve those soils. And we'll try and draw all of that out of Nick for January. Something to look forward to, Nick. So anyway, enough of me, over to Nick Woodyatt. Thanks, Nick.
Okay, well, thanks, Joe. Yeah, just a slight clarification. It's a bit of a thing of mine that there are independent agronomists out there. I work with some very good ones. Certainly when the video that Frag did over at Overbreathe, there's an independent agronomist there, Robert, who is exceptionally good. So they are out there. Unfortunately, no, it's not unfortunately, the majority of agronomists aren't really. They are salesmen that are called agronomists. So I always try and get the point across that I'm a salesman as well, because it just means that when we say anything, you need to go off and investigate and look and talk to other farmers and just spread your wings a little bit, that's all. Obviously, I'm going to talk, this is very kindly been set up by FWAG, so obviously what I'm trying to talk towards here is farming and wildlife advisory, what the sort of stuff that you'd be listening to and you'd be thinking of. And I'm just going to, obviously, the main body of the talk is carbon and regenerative farming, which then will lead into the microbes in the soil, although I will touch it on it in this. But I will, if I may, just open the talk by getting on my soapbox for a bit, just looking at why we're doing things and what's coming up and the things we've got to talk about. Now, I've got to be careful here, because obviously I can see there's farmers, advisors, people who are working out in the countryside, from an environmental point of view, and it's one of the things that, having travelled around the world and talked around the world and seen what's going on in the world, it is just nice certainly for those sort of people as well. We just need to get a little bit of balance, which you'll see in a moment. So, soapbox bit. Last week, you may have seen on the news that the chap, and I'm sorry, I should remember his name, but I can't, the chap in charge of the UN recently reported that we have to stop fighting nature to save the planet. Well, talk about mentioning the obvious. The shame is that it's the head of the UN saying that, rather than several presidents who, quite frankly, don't seem to give a damn. And that's a shame at the moment. So we do need to do our bit, but also we need to try and push other countries into doing their bit. We can't do it all, otherwise it'll just won't work. We're still warming the planet, which is giving us some strange weather. I've said for a while now, and I think you'll get used to this, I do say things, and it is just to make people think, but I strongly suggest that if anybody comes onto the farm and says that this the climate we've got at the moment is just a natural phenomenon, then I suggest you tell them to bugger off and find somebody else to talk to, because it's so obvious now that we're making a mess of things. And also with the WHO and the world universities are also reporting that we have a limited number of years left in our soils. The picture on the right is a town, 30 minutes away from where I live. That water there isn't dirty, that's topsoil. And that happens every time it rains. When we had that heavy rain event about 7 or 8 weeks ago in Hereford, I was driving up roads to farms where I travelled for at least a mile where my car didn't touch the road because all the topsoil was in the road. We can't carry on like this. It's simply impossible. So if farmers and people out there really care about their children, the futures, then it is something we've got to look at. Obviously, the one thing is that we're being told about warming the planet and fighting nature. No one is discussing the number of people. And that's quite important. I'm not making a point. I'm not saying anything about that. But nobody is discussing the number of people. So if the policy is at the moment to just let it run riot like it has, don't forget that the population of the planet has doubled in my lifetime. If that happens again in the next 40, 50, 60 years, which no reason to say it won't, then food, how we grow the food, where we grow the food is going to become even more important than it is now, and it's already vital. Is there a world food shortage? I don't believe there is. I just believe that the poor people don't get it. And it doesn't matter how much we throw away and what we do, the poor people still won't get it because they can't afford it. The picture on the right-hand side, I'm sorry, it isn't one of mine, and I just couldn't find them, to be perfectly honest. I have spent a lot of time in East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, or Tanzania as they call it, Uganda, on farms and on nurseries. Basically, they are growing food for us. And I think this is an important thing to remember, so that when that chap on the BBC keeps wanting to turn our country into parkland, and when both parties have a policy saying that we can buy cheaper food from abroad, you need to remember that it's being taken out of the mouths of people who are starving. I used to go on to huge units, 2,500 hectares that were growing food just for this country. There was a 7-foot fence around those units with barbed wire on the top, and outside there were people begging. The world's gone potty. So we do need to take into consideration that we are growing a lot of our food abroad, and we are raping their soils, and we are letting it wash into the rivers. So when we hear that our soil won't last long, don't forget that on farms abroad, we are actually destroying the soil a lot quicker than we are here. So it was really difficult for me when I came back, and I'd spent 7 years of my time living in New Zealand and then traveling around the world. It was difficult to come back and find that I've got several farms now that only do environmental schemes, don't grow food at all. They just do environmental schemes. And I'm thinking, surely there's a balance. Yes, we want clean rivers. Yes, we want hedgerows with birds and wildlife in them. We need that to look after our crops, to be perfectly honest. We need wild bird strips on our farms. But I do wonder if leaving farms empty, paying farmers to do nothing, is a right way of treating the people from these other countries. It's the same with the rainforest. You see quite a lot of now, nearly everything's got palm oil in it. And you'll see a lot of things saying, oh, it's from palm oil from areas that are looked after. Well, that probably means they used to be rainforests, but they're looked after now. So again, I know, I did say I'd be on the soapbox just for a minute. So the question is, when we are looking at environmental schemes, when we are looking at what we're doing, I think we need to, can we justify taking food from the mouths of starving people and end up throwing it away like we do? Because we do throw away terrible amounts of food. And I think that's even more important now that so many people have lost their jobs in this country at the moment and can't afford to eat. Then I think possibly we need to look at other ways of doing what we do. And it can just get a little bit annoying when 1 or 2 people on the BBC just want, and government and both the Labour Party, want to turn our land into just big parks. right, to this country. More mouths being fed from a smaller area. As I say, what we refer to now as conventional farming, which is poisoning the ground, poisoning the products, producing very poor food. Most of our salad food, Graham Sate from NTS, who travels the world, a little bit different to me. I talk and try and educate from the basis that I think by using carbon and doing the right thing, farmers become more profitable. And if a farm is profitable, then it can spend money on other things. Hopefully environmental schemes, what we want. Obviously some will spend it on skiing, but obviously they've got to make the profit first. We've had 2 or 3 or even 4 generations now of what we refer to as conventional farming, and that has burnt out the organic carbon out of our soils, the world's soils and our soils. Now, right, I've taken us down, so I'll start to come up now. The good news is that that carbon that we burnt out of the soil, and that carbon was burnt out of the soil with nitrogen, not ploughs. We've demonized pieces of metal when in actual fact it was synthetic nitrogen that has done the damage to our soils, far worse than anything else. But the good news is that all that carbon that we burnt out of our soil and took all the air out of the soil and made the soils needing all the agri-chemicals, is in the air. And all we need to do is grab it, bring it back down into the soil, and then forget the climate consequences, which would be great, but forget that, because carbon is profit from a farmer's point of view. It is their profit that they can put on their bank. Now, from the young ladies I'm looking at in front of me there who are doing environmental schemes, carbon is the answer to what you're doing as well. If you put carbon in the soil, you get the whole life reignites, everything in the soil. I've got regenerative farms where when it rains and the ditches fill up, the water is clear, it is clean, it is not full of all rubbish that's going down the rivers. It is not putting nitrates and phosphates and all the sorts into the rivers. It is clean. So it works for both people. It works for the farmers, it works for the environmentalists, it works for everybody. It is profit. If we have a policy of rebuilding carbon in the soil, we rebuild the profit structure of our farms by reducing the inputs needed. And from the environmental side, from the animal side, that means we're not poisoning everything still. We just totally change it round. This works for everybody. This is a win-win situation. It really is. Is there a need for a change? I occasionally go onto a farm where they are stuck in the past. Nothing I can do about those. No, there really isn't. But we are part of a global community. Again, that's another Hereford town, same flood actually, so I'm cheating there. We need to understand that if we don't grow food here, if we keep reducing the amount of food that we grow here and bring more in from Africa, and by the way, we're not the only one. China have got farms over there that are bigger than Cambridge. You'll see it, if you watch on the telly occasionally, you'll see, oh, China have put all these brand new roads in for the Africans and brand new railways and everything. Oh, isn't that good of them? All they've done is so that they can take from their farms and their mines, because they're digging everything else off, to the docks. That's all they've done. So they've done it for themselves, really, but it just looks as though they've done it for them. But once we've raped all their soils, once we've taken all their soils completely, because they'll lose their soils a lot earlier than us, they will get on Shanks's pony and come north. It's already happening. So wouldn't it be nice to say we are part of a global community, rather than sending them guns and bullets, let's send them information. People like yourself, people like Flag, need to go to Africa and show them the way forward. The last time I was down there, we were driving along and they were burning great big piles of maize. So I got my driver to pull over and translate for me. And I took the machete off the one chap. They've all got machetes, it really is. And I chopped it up in the pile and I said, put some soil, and I said, it will turn into plant food. And they were all saying yes and smiling. They are the friendliest, happiest people. They got nothing. They've hardly got they got one light bulb in the village, and they are wonderfully happy people. So I told them how to do that. I got in the car, and as we were going away and using my phone, I looked in the back. They'd moved the soil off the top, and they were setting fire to the stuff I'd chopped up. It wasn't getting through. So as I say, we need to educate, we need to tell them what's going on. So when it's reported that soils are declining, many farmers go, oh no, it isn't, I've got plenty of soil. It doesn't necessarily mean yours, but we are part of that global community. Although I would suggest that if you go over to the Fens at the moment, they've got about 6 inches of soil left. So they really are in trouble. Cheese, major veg grower over there, are actually considering trying to change back to a mixed farm with animals. Can't see if that's going to work because the supermarkets won't allow animals where veg can grow, which is ridiculous. Question, is it our job to save the world? We know there was cars, we know there are industry. We do have to take our share of the blame. And again, funnily enough, not for the chemicals we sprayed on our crop, but for the nitrogen we put in the soil that broke everything. That is what broke the system. And that is where we need to start looking. Elms, it's on its way. I said this to a farmer yesterday. He said, what's elms? I couldn't believe that. Obviously, the planning has been superb. We know what's going to happen on January the 1st is all sorted. We know everything that's going to happen. We know what's got to be filled in. What a bloody mess. Nobody knows what's going on. I don't know what's going to happen. However, and this is a concern, and this goes back to what I was just saying, there is no doubt about it from FWAG's point of view, excellent news. Farmers are going to be paid for catchment sensitive areas, more stewardship, woodland creation and management, tree health and hedgerows, although tree health, of course, in fact, global warming is killing most of our trees off because of disease. Environmental land management, whatever that is. So all of these things on the surface look really, really good. But I've read through it and I've asked other people, nobody seems to mention nutritious food or how to grow food correctly so that we can take the whole farming industry forward. That is a concern, especially with what we're doing to other countries. And yes, that picture at the bottom, green tarmac, we can't have that. There was a piece last week where I understand that swallows are not long for this world. There's been a report where the swallow, because it's so warm now, our autumns have been so warm, the swallows aren't going away early enough. So of course, that by the time late December, early January comes and the frost, there's no food, they drop dead. So it's happening in North America straight as well. So we do need to change. Right? And all I'm saying is we need to change in a way that's sensible to wildlife and the number of males that need feeding. So the way forward, in my opinion, it is easy. Carbon. It's what we are. In my best Star Trek speak, we are carbon-based units. That was Star Trek 1, if you're interested. It is the carbon in our bodies. It is the carbon in plants that connect the electricity. We are all electrical living things. Anything living has got an electrical charge. It is the carbon that creates that. It is the most important thing there is. Take the carbon out, we do not live. Take the carbon out of plants and they don't operate. It is the most important. Got to be careful from an agronomist because I'll say that this nutrient is the most important, and then of course nitrogen is the most important, and then of course copper is the most important. Depends what you're talking about. Whenever you're talking about, when it's always the most important. And of course, if you take one of them out, then nothing works. So I do appreciate that. But carbon is fundamentally life. So it possibly is just a little bit more important than the others. Carbon is what we do. Farmers capture carbon and put it into plants. It is what we do. Environmentalists, everything all the life in the soil lives in the humic layer, that dark layer, the one that smells really lovely. They live in that. That is carbon. Unfortunately, yes, we possibly 150 years ago, or 250 years ago, we made a mistake. We started burning carbon as well. That has really screwed us up. We know that. Can't go back. But what we can do is we can start to say, right, how can we start putting the carbon back where it belongs? It is suggested in the North American states, if they increase their organic matter, and it should be organic carbon, that statement, if we increase organic carbon in the soil by 1%, I think it's something like 80 billion tons of carbon goes back in the soil. That's just 1%. Now, bearing in mind that their carbon level used to be 8% in the days of the prairies, and it's now 1%, it just shows you how much carbon we can take from the atmosphere and put into the soil. What does it do? It sequesters cations. So the main feed, the calcium, the potassium, bonds onto carbon to make it usable. Magnesium, of course. It complexes anions. We know that phosphorus, when you put it onto the soil, it locks into the soil. If there's carbon there, it complexes with the carbon to make a phosphate that the plant can use that won't lock up. We can do it. We can use it for that. And if you remember that phrase, when we look at humic and fulvic acid in a while, you'll see how they match in, because it's the same thing. It feeds, it feeds the soil life, but it's not only the feed, it's where it lives. It's sort of having it's like a house that you can eat. I suppose that's the best way of putting it, because not only do you live in it, you eat it. It is exactly everything in the soil depends about it. That's quite a poor picture on the right, because it's very rare now on normal farms where I see them ploughing that you see any birds, because quite frankly, there's nothing for them to eat, so they don't follow the plough around anymore. By the way, I'm not defending ploughing, because the trouble with plough, it pans 5 inches down, so it all looks nice, it grows lovely, but when it rains, the water can't penetrate, so it just fills up. It's not a brilliant idea, but it's not the one that's done the damage. It's in our interest to capture the carbon, because you will increase your yields. You'll get more profit. You'll get higher yields with less fertilizer and little or no agrochemicals. Herbicides are still a bit of an issue. We do still use some of those, but on my regen farms this year, apart from I used one little bit of epoxyconazole against a bit of yellow rust, other than that, I didn't use any agrochemicals. I used fungicides made out of bacteria, which I'll come to in a bit, but I didn't use any agrochemicals, no poisons. There is no doubt about it, when they do finally sort out, that if we're going to deal with Europe, we will have to abide by their rules. I mean, there is no point around. There's nothing wrong with that. And I would much, much rather deal with Europe than I would America. American agriculture is disgusting. So I would much rather be dealing with Europe. But if we're going to do that, we're going to be restricted on how we use nitrogen, and we're going to be restricted on how we use phosphorus. That's brilliant, because I can chop your nitrogen use in half almost overnight by using carbon, and you will still get the same, if not higher yields. The RD209, blessed, actually says that, and I'd say 40 to 60, but we'll keep in the middle, 50% of the nitrogen you use onto the soil isn't used by the plant. So first of all, for every £100 you spend on nitrogen, £50 been wasted. How stupid is that? The second thing is, Professor Lal from India pointed out, for every kilogram of nitrogen you put on the soil that isn't taken up by the plant, burns off 100 kilograms of organic carbon. And there is global warming in a nutshell. Phosphorus, we've used phosphorus for years. This is all part of the con. People have used for every, and again, the RD209 is quite open about this. For every 100 kilograms of phosphorus you put on the soil, less than 30 goes in the plant. The rest of it gets locked into the soil. If we can start to increase the bacteria and the fungi in the soil, all that phosphorus that was locked up comes back to you. And it's there. They're suggesting in certain parts of the world, and this has got to be one of them, there is enough phosphorus in the soil for bloody a generation. One of my top farmers, which I'll come to in a moment, Tim Parton, hasn't used any P&K on his farm in 10 years. In actual fact, the K is starting to creep up, and we don't use it. Hopefully, farmers, and through grants with environmental groups and all that, will be paid for improving the soil. I've got issues with that purely because I don't know how people would police it, whether that will come to groups like FWAG and other like-minded people to actually do it for them. But to actually, what are we going to monitor and how are we going to monitor? That's going to be incredibly difficult. but it's still, I still want to see it, but I'm not going to hold my breath too much on that one.
Have we frozen?
Looks like it.
Uh-oh, Nick.
Yeah, Nick's frozen.
Cut him off. We'll just give him a moment to see if he comes back to us.
Yeah, oh no, he might be trying to rejoin because he's just disappeared out the call.
All right, we'll just wait for him to come back in and get him back talking. Give him a couple of minutes. So far, so good. It's very interesting. I'm warming up for all the good stuff. Unmute, Nick.
It died out complete. It just died on me.
That's okay. You left us hanging. Time to come back in.
Sorry about that. Right. Am I still there?
Yep, you are.
Yep, thank you very much. Right, seaweed. When it suggested that the first life dragged itself out of the sea, there was 77 micronutrients in the plant life that came out, which most of them are looked at and ignored these days. I was having quite an interesting talk yesterday. There's a lot of work in Poland being done with nickel. We don't use nickel, and yet they're suggesting it's a fantastic fungicide. But all of these things that we don't use are still in seaweed, so it is useful. The problem with seaweed is becoming very difficult to use, and also it's incredibly expensive. As I understand it, it's used in a lot of beauty products, and as you may notice, I don't use a lot of those, so I don't come across a lot of seaweed. So but I mean, in the perfect world, I would use seaweed along with the humics, with the carbon, but it can become expensive. Compost. When you're looking at regenerative farming, organic capture farming, people say, what's the best thing to do? Then composting tons and tons of material and using that is by far the best. You cannot beat it. If you want to go to a regenerative farm quickly, if you want to start direct drilling quickly, if you wanted to go organic quickly, then compost is the answer. The problem is there simply isn't enough material left in the country. Simon Cowell proved this. He had very, very heavy soils. By God, didn't he work? He worked hard, but he could get hold of many, many tons of material. He bought the right machine for turning it. He composted in windrow fashion, and the results were stunning. And when he used to say things like, oh, you don't need things like biostimulants or anything like that if you do this, he's absolutely right. And no doubt about that. You don't need me if you can compost, if you get enough compost. But of course, the country is buying more and more of its meat from abroad because, of course, they don't have to meet the standards we do. And more people are starting to eat less meat or no meat at all, as my daughter will proves. So composting is becoming difficult, but if you can, and if you can find compost, there's nothing to beat it. The second part of compost, and I should have put it on there really, you go from if you can't compost, then you cover crops, and I will mention this in a minute because again with Tim Parton, it's slower, there's no doubt about it, but if you do cover crops properly and don't cut corners, it is fantastic, but it's still not as quick as composting. Fish frames, if you can get hold of, a lot of products are based on fish. Obviously, it isn't based on edible fish. We've had them, but it is the fish fakes are ground up. And again, there's a huge amount of goodness in there, lots of carbon and lots of other things, so it is good. And then, of course, the air. It's full of it, and that's the one we really want to attack. Now, the best way of taking it out of the air is bacteria in the soil, soil life. And this, again, this is the importance, is that so many things are vital. Having an open soil, soils that are compacted won't work properly. So if you've got soils like that, it just doesn't work. We need air to be able to penetrate into the root zone. First of all, roots follow air spaces. They don't penetrate soil, they go round it. And I've got videos of that, it's proven. So a nice aerated soil. This is why ploughing and power harrowing is, a lot of people say, oh, well, of course I get fantastic roots. Yes, you do, no argument. Power harrowed soil is fantastic for rooting because it follows the air round, it proves the point. But it lets the air into the soil. Everything living in the soil breathes. And when it breathes out carbon dioxide. So it takes the oxygen out of the air and it breathes out carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide comes back up and it goes into the stomata underneath the leaves. Why do we think stomata are on the underside of leaves, or at least of broadleaf plants? Wheats and other stuff, they're on both sides, but certainly on a lot of plants, they're just underneath because that's the process. So we do need all of the stuff living in the soil, then that produces the carbon dioxide for the strength of the plant. Believe it or not, there isn't enough carbon dioxide in the air to grow really successful crops. We had animals the size of houses. If you've ever noticed, their mouths, this is the plant eaters, not the meat eaters, but the plant eaters only had mouths slightly bigger than a large horse. So they were it's suggested that the Jurassic period, the CO2 levels were about 4%. Many, many times higher than now. The planet was higher, hotter, all sorts, although there was only one lump of land. And because the CO2 was much higher, the bricks of the plants was huge. So you ended up with massive animals, small mouths, and they were eating greens. So it is a strange one, that, where back then there was so much CO2 and now we can't handle it. It's not changing. Why are you not changing? Oh, no, 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 no. You have to excuse me a second. All right, I must have gone to the wrong one. It was that one. Let's go to that one. Share. Ah, there we go. I don't know what I did, but it worked, so let's not worry. So there's the argument between regenerative farming and conventional farming. Conventional farming is it's like farming like an onion. Something new comes out and you just put it on. This is why inputs on conventional farming are so high. You just keep putting new chemical, new fungicide, new fertilizer, and you just keep putting it on. The thing is, because everything's in a bag and in a bottle, it is very easy. And this, again, this is one thing that rolls me a little bit, because a so-called agronomist could go on to a farm in January and give a farmer one piece of paper and everything's written down what they're going to do the whole year, regardless of how the crop's growing, what the weather's doing, what pests arrive. It is very simple. Regenerative farming, on the other hand, is you have to think about that. You have to look out, you have to crop walk, you have to discuss, you have to read, you have to learn. It's immensely difficult. It's more like a big jigsaw. And the problem is when you take a piece out and you bring a new piece in, that new piece don't fit, so everything else has to move. Regenerative farming is hard work. It certainly is at the moment. It'll get easier because, of course, it'll be as we go to a systems approach, as from a product approach, that system will just become the norm. So it will get a lot easier. But we've certainly followed a type of farming up to now that uses an unbalanced nutritional program based on high nitrogen and high chemical inputs. The one gives you the other. You overuse nitrogen, down goes the bricks, down goes the air in the soil. You get then up goes the need for fungicides. It's as simple as that. The two are intrinsically linked, and as far as the big companies are concerned, that's how it was designed. I used to be the national sales manager for a rather large company. The person I work for used to work for a rather large company. We've been there. We know the system. We know it's a con. We've done it. So that's why nobody shouts at me for saying that. It is designed so that you use more and more nitrogen. I've got farmers now that can remember back in the 70s when they used to use half the amount of nitrogen they do now to get the same result. And that's what you do. You just keep moving on. You just keep pushing it forward. We've been robbing the soil of carbon and other vital nutrients. We've just been pinching the crown jewels. And we've been, in that same time, we're destroying the soil flora and fauna. Oh no, I got that wrong way around. Flora and fauna, which now the thing is, if we can put that back, we can put it back quite easily. If we can get it back, that means that you'll have a huge workforce working for you. You'll have soil that on the right hand side, that's Tim Parton with his drill goes there. We don't follow any track he drives where he likes, and the soil just pops back. On those fields there, last winter when it rained for 6 months, I walked those fields all the time in my shoes. I never had to put Wellingtons on. He's got it operating. If you can get the microbes and the worms working in your soil, it's equivalent to having 5 bullocks per hectare all the time going around fertilizing. That's the amount. They could do an immense amount of work for you for nothing. Why regeneration farming or carbon capture? We haven't got a choice. It's as simple as that. If we don't do this, then things are just going to carry on with a downward spiral. And this is why you've got passionate people. I mean, you must be, and I don't know the ladies from FWAG, but they must be bloody passionate, so they wouldn't do it. I mean, you've got to believe in the countryside, but also I think it's important that we understand that the countryside has got to feed us as well. It's got to feed us and the wildlife. I suppose that's what I'm trying to say. It's all about, and it'll only do that if we get a healthy soil, balanced nutrition. Just a simple one. I mean, there's loads of these. When you put nitrogen onto the plant, it locks up potassium and copper. Potassium and copper are lignin. So if you lock those two up, you'll need PGRs. It's as simple as that. And there's quite often phosphorus. If phosphorus, as in phosphate, can only be taken up if the zinc there 10 to 1. You need 10 parts phosphate to 1 part zinc. There are ratios. Everything is designed. Nature spent millions of years getting these balances right, and it worked beautifully until we cocked it up. I've got a picture there. I work very closely with Tim. Most of my trials are on his farm. He's won no end of awards. If you do get the chance to listen to him speak, it's well worth it. He does the job. He can explain things farmer to farmer really well. He's very, very popular on the circuit. Obviously, I've got a picture there. It looks like his legs have been chopped off. But other than, I mean, he really is the nicest, most minute. I mean, he is generous to a fault with his information, and he genuinely enjoys farming. He's got no chemicals on fire. He doesn't do organic. We prefer the saying, does nature object? So we don't use any MOP. We don't use any triple. His soils don't need it. They're alive. And no fungicides. This year, we're actually looking at trying to take nitrogen down to under 100 kilograms per hectare, which we know we can do it. It's just a question of getting the carbon right. We've got to put carbon on at higher levels. So what do? We low nitrogen use. That's the first thing when you're talking to any farmer, or when you're a farmer looking at regenerative farming, the first thing you've got to do is break your nitrogen addiction. That's the first step. If you don't do that, there's no point. When I went into a new farm a few weeks ago, his first words were, "Oh, I've tried a couple of these new products, they don't work for me." I said, "How much nitrogen you use?" He had 300 kilograms per hectare. And I said, "Well, I'm wasting your time, you're wasting my time. I don't want you to use my product because they won't work." And as it happens, it turns out he was a very cute cookie, to be honest, and he knows he's got to change and he wants to change, and we are working together now. But if you can't bring yourself to bring your nitrogen down by using carbon, if you can't do that, then nothing else works. So don't waste your money. We don't, on Tim or all the other farms I go on to, we don't use any PGRs at all. I don't believe in them. And as I said earlier on, we only use one little bit of fungicide this year because I didn't get the bloody silicon right, but that's it. And also overall, his yields are really good. This year it was lower. I mean, everybody's were. He made no secret about that, but his profit margins were still there this year. Basically, because we saw what we would see early on what was going on, so we just stopped putting stuff in. One farm I went on to, not too far from Tim's, we did a crop walk. This is the sort of thing that the farmers and everybody's got to think about now. We walked round, he said, what are your recommendations? I said, leave it alone. I said, there's nothing wrong. Everything's fine, it's growing, everything's going on. I said, let's see what the weather does. 2 hours later, he phoned up and he said his agronomist had been in who wanted him to spray for £65 a hectare as an insurance spray. And I said, what did you do? He said, I put the phone down. I said, well, are you sure? And he said, yep. I said, well, and then they got to start thinking. And as it turned out, it was the right call. I don't believe in, I don't like the thought of putting chemicals on just for the sake of it beats me. Right, where are we for time? Oh, Christ. Very quickly then, 3 steps to regen farming. Get your nitrogen under control. 180 kilograms is a sweet spot. Anybody over 180, you're really going to struggle to get all the good things, the new products and the carbon, all that to work properly. 180 and you get 150, now we're at 120. Funny enough, once you go down to 180, it becomes, I've got farmers who actually, they're challenging themselves to see how low they can go. The way you do this is not only carbon, but also balancing other things. Like I mentioned, I make sure that when we do put some in on, the potassium and the copper's there, with manganese, molybdenum, all the nuts and bolts are already there. So when the N goes on, look at the type of N you're using. At the moment, there's a big discussion going on. Urea, granular urea may or may not be banned. They are suggesting that we use urea granules with these nitrogenase inhibitors. Oh, no. It is an awful idea. We are doing so much work environmentally and farming to try and get more life working in there, and now the chemical people want us to put chemicals on that slow down or stop the bacteria working. It has got to be, it's really as one of the most stupid ideas we've come up with for quite some time, but it just shows you how desperate the chemical companies are, and it's up to the farmers to go no to that one. Obviously, your farms, your people, whether you use it or not is entirely up to you, but it really is a terrible idea. We're looking more this year. Last year, this year just gone, I had one spring barley crop. I only used amino acid foliar spray to feed it. It worked beautifully to the point where everything was the same as all the other stuff. All the others, the weights, the clean, everything, but it was the quality. The quality was just out of this world. So yes, we're going to use far more through the leaf. Second step, totally understand humates. It's all over the internet. It's all over the books. Humic acid, fulvic acid. It's from a product called Leonardite, which is uncompressed coal. It's from the Jurassic period. It is immense in what it can do for you. This is the tool to reduce nitrogen. It is fulvic acid I use with nitrogen. It means I can reduce the amount I put on by 1/3, and yet I can still get more N into the plant. The plant doesn't notice I've used less, but the soil does. Fulvic acid greatly increases root mass. You get some seeds and plant them in a bucket of soil and cover them over and use some fulvic acid, and you just plain water and you see the difference. It's unbelievable. It increases phosphate availability because it bonds it up and takes it into the plant. Fulvic acid is the best chelating agent in the world. Nothing touches, nothing we've made has ever got close. It is absolutely fantastic. It dissolves nutrients into a plant available form. It does it, the microbes do it, the fungi does it. It's all part of the carbon cycle in the soil. It's got a CEC of 1,400. Now, the one thing, you can't do this, you can't tell people to do this, although they are doing it. If you put a fulvic acid into your tank, you can mix really weird products together or very varying pHs together. I've seen pH 11 and pH 5 mixed together. I've seen phosphorus and boron mixed together. These things shouldn't happen, but with fulvic acid, you can. but I am not, and I repeat, I am not advising you do that without bucket tests and very careful work. I don't want you phoning me up because you've got a tank full of goo. Also as well, another good thing about, and this explains how it works, Fulvic. Fulvic has got a salt index of 0. So when it's in the soil, it actually reduces the salt index in the soil, so that increases osmosis. And that's the simple way it works. Because it goes down in the soil, technically it goes up in the root and bang, everything goes in. That's how we were taught. Fulvic acid stimulates, I said many there, I think most enzymatic processes within the plant. Sulfur also fits into that statement. And sulfur is, again, balanced. Everything should be there. Why we keep ignoring sulfur? It's a thing that should go in at the part. When the seed goes in and the plants go in, sulfur should be there. It kickstarts everything, including photosynthesis. Why don't we discuss photosynthesis more? Everything on the planet depends on photosynthesis, and we never discuss it. But even photosynthesis is kicked off by sulfur, and the first time a lot of plants see it, you take winter wheat, the first time a winter wheat sees sulfur, when you put the bloody hen on in the spring. We need to start getting those balances right. And it's an amazing bricks builder. Bricks is sugars. Sugars is strength, and the more you can build the sugars, the more strength, the more sugars will go into the soil. Plants will put between 30 and 50% of all the sugars they provide into the soil to feed the soil life. They expect it to be there. They need it to be there to grow properly. So if you're going to go carbon farming, regenerative farming, you've got to feed the people working for you, bits. Third one, silicon. Silicon is not a biostimulant. A lot of people hear about silicon. Oh, no, I'm not sure. I haven't used biostimulants. It's not a bloody biostimulant. It's silicon is no different to any other nutrient. The plant expects it to be there. It's part of one of the major cascades. You get salicylic acid, monosilicic acid, which is silicon. They bond with calcium. Calcium's already got 5 or 6 micronutrients on it. And then that is surrounded by boron, and that goes into the plant. That is a cascade that goes in there. It is part of what goes in. When it goes into the plant, it goes into the cell wall to strengthen the cell walls. You don't need PGRs. It thickens the palisade layer. It thickens, and this is the one that really gets me, it thickens the waxy layer on the outside of the plant. It stops insects and diseases penetrating. They can't get through it. So when you hear somebody from Frontier saying, oh, use Revistar, it's only £50 a hectare, because it de-waxes the plant to get in easy, that statement beggars belief. We're trying to put more wax on, we want to thicken the plant, and then you don't need all these expensive chemicals. 2 applications can be enough. I use diatomaceous earth at the moment. There is a statement going around at the moment, you can't use diatomaceous earth because it kills things in the soil. Now, this popped up a couple of years ago because somebody got powdered diatomaceous earth, which they use on chickens, and micronized liquid diatomaceous earth, which is what we use. Now, I must admit, I investigated 2 years ago, and the Soil Association said no, they were very happy with it. Diatomaceous earth is micronized. They said it's very, very organic. So at the moment, but I am looking at that. We have got potassium silicate, and we've also next year we've got silicon in the form of monosilicic acid. So it's already in its next stage that we can put on, and it will go through the leaf, because diatomaceous earth will only go through the root. Also, silicon is important along with fulvic acid. I've got several people who use digestates from human food source. Now, because we're not fussy about what we eat, you always end up with a digestate that's full of salt. I need to get rid of that salt, or at least hold it away from the plant. If you get too much salt in the soil near a root, it stops taking potassium up. Which is planted like human beings, it prefers salt rather than potassium. So I use this and fulvic to grab hold of the salt. It's the cement between the cells of the plant. It's the strength around the plant. It really is most important. You can't, it was recalled the forgotten nutrient. We mustn't forget it again. We've got to make sure we get that right. And I think this is with farmers where I go in who don't want to use fungicides, this is a major tool, and PGRs. It makes the plants strong enough to stand up on their own. Microbes we will come to next time, because I'm running out of time now. You will hear people say, oh, well, they're there already. Absolutely right. No argument. Of course they're there already. You take the one, my favourite, Bacillus subtilis. If you fall over and lick the soil, you are licking Bacillus subtilis. Of that, there is no doubt. What we do is we alter the levels so that we've got the good ones working harder for us. Of course, the balance will come back down to level. We know that, but we just move things around. I use a lot of Bacillus subtilis, Bacillus liquefaciens, and a trichoderma, a fungi, as my root drench, as my seed drench. I loathe the idea of, I don't use treated seed. Why would you put a fungicide in between the seed and the soil? It doesn't make sense. If you ever want to trial anything, you go and try clean seed as against treated seed, you'll always see a huge difference. But that doesn't mean I don't protect it from disease. That doesn't mean I don't feed it. I use a more natural way, and it seems to work exceptionally well. So yes, they are there. If you say, oh, I don't want to do this, I just want to feed them up. If you use carbon, back to carbon again, we keep coming back to carbon. The more you increase organic matter, and if more you increase organic carbon in the soil, the more of these things you'll have naturally. That picture on the right, I'm sorry, I didn't very good on this because you've missed, I've chopped 2 foot off. That is just the washings out of a tank about 3 or 4 weeks ago on a farm at Newark. That is lawn. So you can guess how much food's on there, none at all. He basically washed out, he'd been brewing BioPlus tea, which is one of our products. I mentioned that. He brewed up, it had gone off because of seed drench over his winter wheat, and he cleaned the bottom of the tank out in a bucket and chucked it on its lawn. And look at that, it's shot. I mean, there's 2 or 3 inches of grass have grown. And there's no food there. So basically what it's done is it's cycled the material in the soil and made various things available to the plant. There is a phrase that every nutrient has got a microbe behind it. And if you need proof, there it is. And also as well, if you ever want to prove that you need to put it where it needs to be, go into a field where the cows have been taken out and the cow pats are there. You know as well as I do, you get a circle of grass and then nothing either side. Because of all the chemicals in the past, we've killed most of the beetles and it doesn't get spread around. We're not allowed to spread on some farms, we're not allowed to spread it around. So you end up with circles where the grass is growing. The grass jumps up 4 or 5 inches, so it does a fantastic job, but doesn't spread out. So if you ever want proof that microbes and nutrients don't move, there it is. How do we feed them? Basically bacteria like sugars of various sorts. I really don't like plain molasses because molasses will feed Humacetes, Pythium phytophthora, it will feed Fusarium and Downy mildew. It doesn't, so I use fermented molasses where the sugars are fermented into amino acids, and it seems to work very well. For fungi, it's carbohydrates. Seaweed, if you want to, aloe vera, again, it's very, very good. Can they replace agrochemicals? Yes. I make no bones about this. I can show you photos. I can show you where Fusarium control, Tim missed a bit. He went into one field, he didn't have his GPS on and missed a perfect circle, and the ears were black. And where we'd used Bacillus subtilis, Bacillus liquefaciens, there was nothing. So on the bit, he had the black piece tested, that was 20, I think it was 28 or 38% Fusarium. On the rest of the farm where we actually sprayed it properly, there was less than 2%. And also as well, we noticed where he'd missed some spraying in one field, there was brown rust, real bad brown rust on some of the crop, where in the corner, just in the corners and a bit where he'd missed spraying. And on the rest of it, nothing. And it was just as if somebody put a line down, sprayed it one side and not the other. It didn't even spread out. So it worked exceptionally well. So yes, it can. Take all control. That's a big one. People keep saying with second wheats and second cereals. You don't get take all growing in second cereals. You get them growing in the first. You just happen to suffer from them in the second one. So if you increase the amount of carbon in the first crop, that means there's two basic sets that will eat take all. Actinomycetes That's the one that glyphosate kills. Now, you know actinomycetes, because if you pull trash back and it stinks, that means you've killed all that bacteria off. But if you pull it back, if you have used a carbon with the glyphosate and you pull it back and you get that lovely organic smell, that's from actinomycetes. There's also Pseudomonas fluorescens. You got those two together, you won't have take all because they'll eat it, and a lot of other diseases as well. That's what happens in a operating soil. Everything eats everything else. Brewing, Fag very kindly organised a video not so long back where Jake Freestone was in it, and a fat version of my dad, wouldn't he, went in there. So I was open and honest then, and I will say it's not as good as using from the tub, but it is a step forward, and we'll look at that if Joe does want me to do in the autumn, which I'm more than willing to. If we do look at what's in the soil, we'll look at the different ones that are in there and what they do and how they operate. But you must understand that brewing is a sticking plaster. It's not as good as out of the tub. The stuff in the tub was made in machines worth tens of thousands of pounds. We use an IBC with a pump on the side. You've got to have a little bit of common sense here. However, if you put the right food out there and use them correctly, they are working. So it's a great tool. It's just one of those odd things where I go to a farmer and say, BioPlus T is £25 a hectare, and they look as if I've gone mental. So I said, well, if you brew it, it's £3.50 a hectare, so that's fine. Whereas Revistar, that's £50 a hectare, does bugger all, and people are willing to use that. But there you go, just something I don't understand. But brewing is a way of really starting to boost the microbes in the soil. What do? They are 10 times better than any chemical we've ever put around the soil, and they grow with it. There is a lot coming up at the moment. The big boys are trying to get back into it. They're putting Bacillus subtilis on the seed. It's not enough, and it's not the whole team. It's like sending the goalie out without the rest of the team. You need them all there, and you need to feed them, which is why it's far better to have a liquid applicator and run liquid down over the seed as they're going in, which is why a lot of people having a liquid applicator put in. Many of us believe that a reduction in PGRs, in fact, a reduction, total stop of that, and fungicides are a way to higher yields and profits. I personally believe that one of the reasons we can't get near the yields that the seed producers are saying we should be is excess nitrogen, taking the air out of the soil, PGRs, and fungicides. I'm not the only one who thinks that, but I'm willing to say it. A couple of photos to finish off. On the left-hand side there, you don't need for me to point out what I'm looking at there, but on the right, that is clean seed, no fungicide on there, and on the left, it was treated seed. That's Tim's farm. Tim only uses clean seed now. He doesn't use treated seed at all for that reason. On the right, I know it's cabbage rather than arable, but again, it's quite handy when a machine breaks down. That shows you what happens when those plants get put in. I treat them with just they have a quick squirt of a balanced micronutrient package, and that's the difference it makes. There's also Bacillus subtilis and Trichoderma hartzianum in there, because those two, certainly the Bacillus subtilis, is brilliant against clubroot. It just stops clubroot completely. So just so you can use your eyes and you can start to see what's going on. As I mentioned, compost is by far, if you want to go down this to have the most success, it is. But if you can get hold of 10 or 20 tons per hectare, I think it's just immensely difficult to do now. So we have to go to cover crops. The only thing I would say is where I go and they use cover crops, and they're the proper cover crops. So we have a real good cover crop. We put a bit of carbon with them. They get them growing well. That's I don't think that is the King's, but a lot of people, we've got the King's 10 seed. Yes, there's a financial issue, but oh my God, the roots talk to each other. They start to produce mycorrhiza. They start to produce the life. It becomes a roll on everything like's living down there. And it just works absolutely fantastic. And it is, but I have other farmers who have just, they swept a bit of seed up in the corner of something, or they've used a bit of mustard on its own. And that really doesn't, you do need multi-seed to really get the benefits out of it. the only thing I would say on one farm this year, we've done a trial straight after rape. We put mustard in. We direct drilled wheat into the mustard. Once the wheat was at 4 inches tall, the mustard then was about 8 inches tall. We used zipper to take the mustard out, and we didn't use, so that means we had a field on that farm where we didn't use glyphosate at all. So we're just practicing that just for whatever happens in the future. A lot of people will chop straw afterwards. Again, another story going around at the moment, that if you knock a cover crop over or too much straw down, the next crop will be short of food. Well, hi-ho, yes, they are absolutely spot on. If you've got what is referred to as a dead soil, I don't like the word dead soil because there's no such thing as a dead soil, you can just get it back to life. But if you've got a soil where the bacteria and specifically the fungi is low, if you have a cover crop and put that on the ground, don't put it in it, but put it on, that crop will need feeding. The benefits will actually go to the crop afterwards. Come back to like Tim Parton's where we've got loads of stuff in the soil, they will start to break down. Now it's the left-hand one there, the white stuff is trichoderma. You need fungi to break down lignin. Only fungi will break down lignin to release all that goodness to the following crop. And even Tim, when he chops his straw, will spray over the top with a biological product just to kickstart it again with a bit more carbon. I keep coming back to carbon. This is all about carbon. So we put some carbon and trichoderma on there, and it breaks down. He's actually on a video where he picks up a handful of his straw and breaks it. It's like glass. It just smashes in his hand because it's all the lignin's been broken up. The right-hand side there, again, that is Jake's, where the rape looked absolutely beautiful as they came out of the ground. That wasn't many days old. But the thing what you're looking at there is the root. See how the soil's sticking to the root. There is a biofilm. The bacteria releases a sticky biofilm, and it's the green bridge between the root and the plant. So everything is touching. Nothing. There's no space. Nothing. No nutrients or anything at all. You can't jump over a space in the soil. Everything has to be there, and you need a green bridge to get one from the other, and that just shows you a healthy crop. Jake at the moment has probably got some of the best rape that I've ever seen. It is absolutely stunning. But to be fair, this year has been particularly good for early drillers. The rain came onto a warm soil and everything just went bananas. That's an error. Sorry, Joe, I went on a bit long there.
No, that's absolutely fine. All really good and interesting stuff. And we've got quite a few questions in the chat. So I'll crack on with those if that's all right, Nick.
Go on.
So I've got a question here. How good a proxy for soil health is soil organic matter?
I think it's immensely important. It's where everything lives. Soil organic matter, which then breaks down into soil organic carbon. You can, in my opinion, you cannot have regenerative farming, good farming, healthy plants without a good organic matter. But the only thing I will say, I've got to be careful here, I don't want to go too long. You've got to be careful. You can't put raw or uncomposted material into a soil. It actually decreases the organic carbon in the soil, because if you compost materials in the soil, and this is Reading University's done this, is a lot of work behind this. If you put uncomposted material into a soil, the fuel is the carbon that's in the soil, so it actually reduces the organic carbon in the soil. And also as well, you've got to be careful. You don't want to get a burst of bacteria in the soil, because of course you get nitrogen drawdown. So all the nitrogen goes into living bacteria and the bloody plants can't get hold of it. So you do have to be very, very careful about putting raw organic matter onto soil. Raw, uncomposted, sorry.
Uncomposted, yeah.
But it is, it's organic matter stroke organic carbon is vital.
And we've already talked.
Vital to farming, vital to profit, vital to the future of the planet.
And we've already talked, Nick, about using things like compost or cover crops as a good source of that organic matter.
Yeah, I mean, compost can't be beat. It simply can't be beat, but you just can't get hold of it, or you certainly can't get hold of enough. So cover crops, if they're fantastic. And again, and I'm assuming with help from FAG and various, there are schemes around at the moment. I mean, Tim, for instance, uses a wild bird scheme. He's got strips up the side of his field. He absolutely adores the wild birds. It's a big hobby of his, and that gives him the money to run his cover crop scheme. So the two are working together. Nature and farming are working together in balance. It's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. Okay, the next question is the digestate that has the salt in it, and I think this was the human digester, human waste, is it?
No, well, not human waste, human food waste. So basically, your dinner, all that sort of stuff is collected at dumps and that sort of stuff. So it's human food. It's what we eat. It's not. So it's not from the sewage plant. This is actually what we eat. They take it. They extract the methane and all that sort of stuff out of it. But it is fully loaded with salt. So you do have to be very, very careful. It's. I've got one farm at the moment. He's using it. He get not this year, but last year we had 16 ton per hectare of using it. But basically, we do worry about the future with that product. Yeah, absolutely. You're incentivizing food waste, basically. Yeah, I mean, and again, it's something we have to be careful of. The government expects us to be the waste disposal unit of the country, which is fine, but we do have to take on board and say, well, we have to look at heavy metals and we have to look at salt levels. And so we have to do it sensibly. We do it, but we need to do it sensibly. So not to be confused then with sewage sludge, which is, as the name suggests. Yeah, sewage cake, again, I have very good results with sewage sludge. The thing I tend to use humic acid with sewage sludge because it bonds on, it bonds onto various things, it holds certain. So again, I'll use sticking plasters with that. So again, it's a good product in its way. Okay. The only thing I would say with sewage sludge, of course, in many countries now, Dole and Del Monte are refusing to take fruit and veg grown where human waste is used. Okay.
Can I ask quickly, add in that comment about salt in the digestate from food waste? What would be main sort of mitigations you might take for someone who is using quite a lot of digestate?
Well, basically, what we're doing with the two farms that I go to at the moment that use that type of digestate rather than the grown digestate is that we are putting in the autumn we're using a humic acid. In the spring we're putting fulvic acid in as it's sprayed on. When they suck it out of the lagoons, we're actually sucking up some organic carbon first to put it in, so it mixes in as it's going into the lorry. To give you an idea of what human, and funny enough, it depends how it's coming out. I've got two farms, and yet you wouldn't believe they're both the same material. The one just looks like dirty water. The other looks like crude oil. And the one that looks like crude oil, when you're following it, you could cry, because I mean, all you're basically doing is walking over dead worms. They honestly shoot out the ground and they're dead in seconds.
Okay.
Now the other one I use on the other farm where it looks like dirty water, we've had fantastic results this year, and we don't get that. But it's as I say, I don't quite understand that at the moment.
Yeah, sounds like some sort of chemical imbalance.
No, it's salt. The salt's killing them.
Yeah.
The salt is just going down the wormholes and going straight to them, and the worms have got no choice. But have you ever noticed in a gateway or anything, if we have a lot of rain, the worms come out because they've got to breathe. So but they'll come out, and as I say, within minutes they're dead.
Yeah. Okay, next question. How best then is it? Probably leads on actually from what we are talking about. How do we apply it, the slurry, the best way so as to improve the soil and protect that biology?
Obviously, if you are killing worms, then you've got to look and ask yourself whether you want to continue with that one. Now, that's your choice. It's your farm, the farmer's choice on that one. One of the biggest effects we had on the other farm, not that one, but on the other farm, it was all being put on in one go. It was going on, he was putting 40 cubes on in the spring. And I nagged him to at least split it into two. I wanted it in three, really, but he agreed. We put it on in 2 lots. So it went on growth stage 20, 25, I suppose, and the other one was early. Wasn't quite flagged, but it wasn't far off. And he put the other 20 litres in there, and it worked beautifully.
Okay.
So we split it up rather than putting it all in one go. How would you feel if all your food was put on the table on a Monday morning?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, I wouldn't move far. I know it's a silly analogy, but it's a simple. I mean, plants recognise certain things. They're used to certain things. They're used to certain bacteria. They're used to certain fungi. And we try and bludgeon these things to death, and we can't. The plant just doesn't recognise it. It's the same way with people. A lot of farmers at the moment are starting to use old wheat mixes and heritage wheats. These plants can't recognise NO3. They don't recognise NO3. It has to be NH4. So you completely have to change the way you grow the damn stuff. Otherwise, it just won't work.
Yeah, so probably the lesson from that then is less haste when we're trying to sort of get these things on the ground to beat weather. We've also got to look at the how much we're overfeeding everything in one hit.
Patience is a very difficult virtue for a farmer, and I do understand that. I'm an ex-grower. I'm an ex-grower, and I understand patience is incredibly difficult when your livelihood depends on it.
Yeah, and the weather doesn't help.
It's certainly been a challenge. It's the last. I mean, you think over the last 3 years, at least, if not 4 years, when we've actually gone past a month where we haven't broken a record or something's gone wrong somewhere in the world. It's on month. I mean, gosh, sometimes it's weekly, but it's ridiculously common now.
Yeah.
So to say, there was a picture yesterday I was looking at that the RAF took a picture of the largest ever lump of ice floating around.
Gosh.
It is very concerning, but at the end of the day, I do this because my time in Africa really affected me. I think we still need to look at a balance. It's regardless of what the man says on the BBC, we're not going to have badgers walking around wearing waistcoats, smoking a pipe. We've really got to look at a balance and say, yes, we want clean rivers, and we want the wildlife, we want our woodland looked after. I mean, you look at it, I look just up the road, there's Evesham, the amount of new houses have gone up on grade A growing on land. It's ridiculous. And if it's not bloody new houses, it's photo, the energy cells, field after field, just covered over. I'm not for 1 second am I criticising the farmer, because if you can create income like that, brilliant. But how is that benefiting the environment? How is that benefiting the country? I don't get it.
Back to the balance. Yes.
I think it is. Well, that's how I like to think.
So this is a long one, but or rather the answer could be long, but if you could make it short, that would be great.
Oh, no.
Can you please explain what brewing actually entails?
That will be the next one in January.
Yes.
That's brewing. Basically, is there's two. You either brewed inoculum, which is you take product out of a tin, so you know exactly what's in there, or you take composted material, which is a compost tea. You decide what you want to do with it. I'll explain how you choose the difference. I mean, basically, it's quite simple. If you're looking to just increase the health of the soil, it's a compost tea. If you're looking to replace a fungicide, you need specific bacteria. If you're looking to put stuff onto seed that are going to treat disease, you need to use brewed inoculums. So basically, you just put 1,000 litres in the tub. I mean, there is the video is on the FWAG site. I'm sure. Well, I'm assuming it's around somewhere. You put 1,000 litres of water in a tank. You put some food source in, depending on what you're trying to brew. You brew it for 24, 30 hours, or Tim now is brewing mad. He's addicted to brewing now. So he brews for 16 hours because he's got a heater on it. And by the time it's finished, it looks like thin Marmite. He brews up that much stuff. So it's quite involved. The video's there. It is something we do to make it economical, because the problem with arable farming is it's difficult to make money out of growing food, which again is an amazing thing, but so we have to be careful with the money. So you brew to make things economical. You look at the consortium. Oh God, I've mentioned the product again. It's mainly the Bacillus subtilis and the Amula liquefaciens. they're the two strongest that are going to do the most for you. If you use it out the tub, they are £4.80 a hectare. If you brew it, I think it's 80p per hectare, which means people use more of it more often. But yeah, it's very difficult to answer that as the question, because as I say, next time we'll have photos and we'll go through it completely if you want me to.
So it's basically taking a concentrated substance that you've either bought or you've created yourself and making more from it, basically,
Yeah,
so you can spread that out and lower your costs.
In a nutshell, absolutely right.
Okay, going to change tack now and move to cover crops, I guess. Have you done any trials with a crimper roller instead of glyphosate? Because that is going to be the next big question.
Yep.
To kill covers pre-drilling, or is our climate too cold for this?
Yeah, well, I agree that we fully enough, at Tim's this year, well, with several places, but Tim this year, he has used a crimper roller on the front. He had it on the front of the tractor with his 750A behind him. So that worked very well. That was on the 10 seed mix. We tend to find, and in the American house as well, where they use crimper rollers, they tend to use mixes with less grasses or no grasses in, because of course if you crimp grass they just pop back again if stronger than they were before. So again, it depends what you've got in there. Beans, Phacelia, all this sort of stuff does crimp very well. So yeah, it's not a big thing over here yet, certainly nowhere near as big as it is in the States, but it is something we're looking more at. Fully enough, we had one made, so people are just playing around with it. Tim, the best way, to be honest, with a cover crop as far as rolling was concerned, was rolling it when it's -5. But of course, we haven't seen we've hardly seen a frost in the last 3 years, so we've lost that ability. But again, with the providing you don't, I'm not encouraging people to dash into a direct drill. The soil has to be ready for a direct drill. It's no good direct drilling into soil that's too thick, where you're putting them into seed into Play-Doh. Won't work, and then the drill gets blamed. You need an open soil first before you do that. But if you are direct drilling and you've got the right cover crop, it works really well. Where we've seen it several times this year, where quite frankly we didn't need the crimper roller. It just flattened it down, and it worked well. Where there's the grasses and the oats and the stuff in there, we tend to get the sheep to take that off first with the glyphosate. But you are right. How much longer are we going to have that? Interesting note yesterday, there was I was told that in France, where we thought it was going to be banned, it's actually gone back to the government, where it may be that glyphosate is allowed to be used if you improve your growing in a regenerative system.
Yeah.
There's nothing, you've got to be careful. I don't like glyphosate. I don't like the fact but the trouble is, we are being blamed for what the Americans are doing. When people say a third of white bread or a third of cheap white bread has weed killer in it, which is glyphosate, yes, it has, but it's not from us. That's from the Americans using GMO maize and making cheap flour out of it, and then we buy it to make cheap bread.
Okay.
That's where that's coming from. That's not our fault.
Yeah.
It will. I think, and I've got to be careful. I've got a lot of Scots farms I look after. I think one of the first places it will go is they will stop it being used as a desiccant, which means certainly in Scotland they'll probably lose the ability to grow a lot of cereals.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's our next big worry, that. So let's last two questions then, Nick, and I promise you can stop. Going back to slurry again, cow slurry going on to grass. Should it be treated before being used, i.e. add humates when applied, or maybe separated and composted before?
There's two quick answers to this. One, if it's slurry and it's all taken into a slurry pit, there are aerobic bacteria groups now that you can put in there, and it starts composting it in the slurry pit. So it pre-prepares it. If it's coming from a barn where there's straw and it's built up of straw, then it's better to use an anaerobic bacteria. I've got 2 or 3 people doing this now. I suppose Ian's the best one. Ian, small farmer, and he runs a few cattle and overwinters them in store. And his wife, when he used to go in and muck them out and bed them down, his wife wouldn't let him in the house. He had to take his overalls off outside the back. Once he started putting anaerobic lactobacillus and various other bits and bobs onto the straw as he was treating them, as he was bedding them down, she didn't even know he'd been in the barn. So yeah, you can start the composting process either in the slurry pit or in the barn way before you put it on the soil. And yes, you will get huge benefits when that goes out. Yeah,
yeah, excellent. And the very last,
there was a pig farm in Germany.
Yeah.
That was being a huge pig farm that wasn't far from Munich, and it was being closed down because of the smell. It wasn't too far from a school. And basically they started spraying the area and the slurry pits with this anaerobic bacteria, and the problem went away. It's still there.
Fantastic. Yeah, just shows how it works.
Well, yeah, it is. It's very good. I'm suggesting that we use it on these where we go human waste, because I go onto farms where there's human waste piled up. It makes me feel sick.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
It is disgusting. Yeah, and then yeah.
Yeah. Okay, very last question, Nick. Could you please say a little bit more about using Zipar to kill mustard after direct drilling?
How could I say a little bit more? I'm wondering what else I could say. I mean, I used Zipar at the full rate, 0.75. Don't quote me on that. I think it's 0.75. I didn't put anything else with it. It was just, the fact is that we were trying. Lots of farmers are looking at the future. They know they're going to be restricted on N and P, so we're doing trials on that. And there is the chance that we're going to lose glyphosate, so we're doing trials on that. As I say, that it was one that just happened to work. At Tim Parton's, it worked. We didn't use, on one of his cover crops that he went into, he went over with his 750A. It was the 10 seed mix from King's. That didn't have any glyphosate on it. The field looked superb. And the one I used, as I say, we just went in there. He broadcast the mustard, if I remember rightly. Yes,
so did it have no effect?
Broadcast the mustard. We direct drilled. He uses horse to direct drill the wheat in. We did a reasonable count. I think it's around about 300 seeds on putting it in. It's grown really well. It looked well. And we then started to panic because the mustard all of a sudden decided, because of again, it was a mild autumn, the mustard just took off. We said, oh, we better do something about that. So we went in with Zipar, and it to be honest, the Zipar killed it quite slowly, but it killed it. And it worked perfectly. So now you've got a wheat crop with dying material coming down onto it.
And
so
that had no detrimental effect.
It's on a bank, so of course the ground has got a nice cover over it for when it rains.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Nick. Thank you so much. That was such an interesting talk. I'm really looking forward to January when we can expand on the sort of biology and have a look what's going on beneath our feet. And
that's it. We'll look specifically underneath the ground or on the plant. We'll really get into the nitty gritty of, we'll say hello to a few microbes.
Yes. Okay. Well, we'll send this recording out to our facilitation fund groups and wider circles if people are interested. I know there's a few other people on tonight. But thank you once again from all of us at FWAG and all of our farmers. And we will speak to you very, very soon. You can see Nick's details left up on the screen there. If you want to get in touch with Nick directly, please jot down that. Or if you don't get a chance to do that, come back to one of us and we'll pass on Nick's details. But thank you very much. It was a really interesting talk.
Good.
All right, thanks guys.
Thanks very much, Nick.